The sun rose slowly over the rolling fields of Kentucky, painting the sky with soft streaks of gold and pink. The morning dew clung to the blades of grass, and the distant sound of a rooster echoed through the hills. On a small patch of farmland just outside a quiet town, a young woman named Emily Dawson was already awake. She stood on the front porch of her family's farmhouse holding a cup of black coffee and watching the first light touch the barn roof. Life on the Dawson farm had never been easy, but it had always been honest. The land had been in the family for 3 generations. Her father used to say, "This soil remembers every hand that worked it." He had passed away 2 years earlier, and since then Emily had taken it upon herself to keep the place running. Her mother Mary tried to help, but age and illness had slowed her down. Most of the work fell to Emily, feeding the animals, tending the crops, fixing fences, and trying to make ends meet. By 6 in the morning, she was already out in the barn, pulling hay from a bale and tossing it into the stalls. The cows mooed softly as they ate, and the horses snorted, waiting for their turn. Emily hummed under her breath, the same old tune her father used to whistle. The air smelled of hay, leather, and earth, a smell she had grown to love even when the work felt endless. When she stepped outside, her neighbor, old Mr. Carter, waved from the road as he drove his tractor by. "Morning, Emily," he called. "Morning," she shouted back with a smile. "Looks like rain later." "Sure does. Better get them seeds covered before it hits." She nodded. Farming folks always talked about the weather first. It could make or break a season. Emily's dog, Rusty, followed her everywhere, his tail wagging as he trotted beside her. She bent down to scratch his head before heading toward the chicken coop. The hens clucked in greeting, and she gathered the warm eggs in a small basket. As she walked back to the house, she couldn't help noticing how worn the fences looked, how the paint on the barn had started to peel. Every little repair cost money they didn't have. Inside, her mother was sitting by the window knitting quietly. The morning light touched her silver hair, making it glow. "You were up before dawn again," Mary said softly. "Couldn't sleep," Emily replied, setting the eggs on the table. "I kept thinking about the bills." Her mother sighed. "We'll find a way, honey." "We always do," Emily didn't answer. She loved her mother's faith, but she also knew the bank didn't care about hope or prayers. They wanted payment. 3 months behind on the mortgage, and another notice was likely to come any day. After breakfast, Emily drove into town in her old pickup truck. It rattled and coughed as she made her way down the narrow country road. The town was small. One main street with a diner, a hardware store, and a little post office that smelled of paper and dust. Everyone knew everyone here, which could be both comforting and tiring. Folks meant well, but word traveled faster than the wind. At the post office, she picked up the mail. Her stomach sank as she saw the envelope with the bank's logo. She didn't open it there. She didn't need to. She already knew what it said. "Morning, Emily," called out the postmaster, a kindly man with white hair. "Your mama holding up okay?" "She's doing all right, thank you," Emily replied, forcing a small smile. He nodded and handed her the rest of the mail. "Tell her I'll stop by next week with some of those canned peaches she likes." "I'll tell her," she said before heading back out. Outside, she paused by the bulletin board. There were flyers for yard sales, lost dogs, and a notice for the upcoming County Agricultural Expo. She read it twice. The expo was a big deal for local farmers, vendors, equipment demos, and even a few investors from out of state. It wasn't something she'd ever gone to before. It always felt like something for people with more money, more connections. But this year, something in her stirred. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance someone there might be willing to invest in her farm, or at least give her advice on how to keep it alive. On the drive home, she kept thinking about it. The idea scared her a little. She wasn't used to talking to rich business types in suits. Her world was fields and barns, not meetings and deals. But she also knew she couldn't let fear keep her from trying. That evening, after feeding the animals again and making supper for her mother, she finally opened the bank letter. As expected, it wasn't good news. They had 30 days to pay what was owed or risk foreclosure. She sat at the table staring at the paper while the wind rattled the windows. Her mother looked up from her knitting. "Bad? Bad," Emily said quietly. "They're giving us 1 month." Mary set her needles down and sighed. "Maybe we could sell a few acres." "I already thought about that," Emily said. But nobody's buying small farms anymore. They want big land, not what we've got. They sat in silence for a while. The clock ticked softly on the wall. Finally, her mother said, "You should go to that expo." Emily blinked. "You saw the flyer?" "Of course. It's on the bulletin board every year. Maybe this time it's worth a try." Emily hesitated. "Those events are for people with money, Mama. I'd just look out of place." "Sometimes the right person notices you when you least expect it," Mary said gently. "You've got your daddy's spirit. Don't you forget that." Later that night, Emily stood by her bedroom window looking out over the dark fields. The moonlight shimmered over the pond and the corn rows. It was her world. Every inch of it held memories of her father teaching her how to plant, how to ride, how to believe in herself. She wasn't ready to lose it. The next morning, she made up her mind. She would go to the expo. The day of the event arrived with clear skies. Emily put on her cleanest jeans, a checked shirt, and the brown boots her father had given her before he passed. She brushed her hair into a neat braid and tried not to feel out of place as she drove toward the county fairgrounds. Dozens of shiny trucks and cars were already parked there. People moved in groups, laughing and talking, most of them dressed like they'd never touched a shovel in their life. She checked in at the registration desk, feeling a bit nervous. The lady behind the counter smiled brightly. "Welcome. Are you here to exhibit or network?" Just looking around," Emily said. "Well, enjoy yourself. There's free coffee near the main tent." She walked through rows of booths displaying farming equipment, irrigation systems, and tech she didn't even recognize. There were men in suits talking numbers and women in heels carrying tablets. Every now and then someone handed her a brochure, and she tucked it into her bag, though most of it made little sense to her. Then something caught her eye, a small sign that read, "Green Future Agricultural Innovations." The booth looked fancier than the rest, with sleek screens showing images of drones flying over fields and high-tech tractors. Behind the counter stood a tall man in a tailored gray suit, talking to a group of reporters. His voice was calm and confident, the kind that made people listen. "That's Alexander Hale," whispered a woman standing nearby. "You know, the billionaire who owns Hale Industries. He's the one developing smart farming systems." Emily had heard the name before. He was famous for his wealth, but also for his reclusive lifestyle. People said he rarely appeared in public, and when he did, it was usually for business, not small-town expos. She turned to leave, not wanting to draw attention to herself, but one of the drones displayed on the table suddenly lost balance and buzzed toward the crowd. Without thinking, Emily stepped forward and caught it before it crashed to the ground. A few people gasped. The billionaire looked up from his conversation. "You've got quick reflexes," he said with a small smile. Emily blushed. "Guess I've caught worse on the farm." The reporters chuckled, and Alexander seemed amused. "Do you farm?" he asked. "All my life," she replied. "Small family place out by Mill Creek." He nodded thoughtfully. "Then you understand real soil. Most people here only understand data." She wasn't sure how to respond. "Well, data doesn't grow corn," she said after a moment. That made him laugh softly. True enough. For a few minutes they talked. He asked about her farm, the crops she grew, and how the seasons had treated her this year. She noticed that while he spoke with the calmness of someone used to being in control, there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes, a genuine interest, not the usual polite kind. When she mentioned how hard it was keeping up with expenses, he listened without interrupting. Eventually, one of his assistants came over to remind him about another meeting, and Emily took that as her cue to leave. She gave him a polite nod. "Thanks for the chat. Thank you for catching my drone," he said, his tone light but his gaze thoughtful. Not many people would have stepped forward like that. As she walked away, she couldn't help wondering why he had looked at her that way, like he was already thinking about something. She didn't know it then, but that small chance moment would soon change the course of her life in ways she couldn't imagine. By the time she returned home, the sky was glowing orange with sunset. Her mother was on the porch waiting. "How was it?" she asked. "It was different," Emily said, setting down her bag. "I met someone. Just talked for a bit." Her mother smiled knowingly. "Someone important?" "I guess so," Emily replied, not sure what else to say. She looked out at the fields again. The air was still, the world calm for now, but somewhere deep inside she felt that something new had just begun, something far bigger than a small-town farm girl could ever expect. The morning after the expo, Emily woke to the sound of rain tapping softly on her window. The smell of wet earth filled the air, and the fields outside glistened with silver droplets. She lay still for a moment, thinking about the day before and about the big tents, the polished machines, and the man in the gray suit who had spoken to her like she actually mattered. It had been such a strange, unexpected day. Never in her life had she met anyone like Alexander Hale. The way he talked was calm but confident, like every word had a reason. Most people like him didn't even notice folks like her. Yet for a few minutes he had listened as if her small farm was worth something. She smiled faintly at the thought, then shook her head. He was a billionaire. People like him didn't cross paths with people like her twice. She pulled on her boots and went about her chores. The rain had made the ground soft, so her feet sank slightly as she walked to the barn. Rusty ran ahead, splashing through puddles, tail wagging. Inside, the animals waited patiently, their breath steaming in the cool air. Emily moved quietly among them, humming the same tune she always did when she was lost in thought. Her mother was sitting by the stove when she came back inside, stirring a pot of oatmeal. "You're quiet this morning," Mary said, glancing up. "Just tired," Emily answered, though she knew that wasn't true. "Thinking about that man you met?" Emily froze halfway to the table. "What man?" Her mother smiled gently. "The one you mentioned from the expo. The one who makes those fancy machines." Emily rolled her eyes. "It was just a short talk, Mama. He probably forgot about me the second I walked away." Mary gave her a knowing look. "Maybe, but life has a funny way of bringing people back together when there's a reason." Emily didn't reply. She didn't believe in fairy tales, not anymore. She believed in hard work and long days, in sweat and soil and the ache of trying to keep something alive. But deep down, she also couldn't quite shake the image of Alexander's face. The calm eyes. The faint smile, the way he'd said, "You understand real soil." 2 days later, while she was out fixing the gate near the road, a sleek black car pulled up by the fence. The kind of car that didn't belong on a muddy country lane. Emily wiped her hands on her jeans and watched as the tinted window rolled down. Her heart skipped. It was him. "Miss Dawson," Alexander said, his voice smooth but friendly. "I hope I'm not intruding." She blinked, startled. "You found your way out here?" "GPS and a curious driver," he said with a small smile. "May I come in for a moment?" Emily hesitated. "Well, it's not exactly a fancy place." "I didn't come for fancy," he said simply. She opened the gate and watched as he stepped out, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the mud. He didn't complain, just smiled and followed her toward the porch. Her mother peeked out the window and nearly dropped her cup when she saw who it was. "Mr. Hale," Emily said awkwardly. "This is my mother, Mary." He shook her hand politely. "It's a pleasure, Mrs. Dawson. Thank you for having me." Mary looked amused. "I didn't exactly have a choice, but you're welcome." They all sat at the kitchen table. Emily poured him coffee, though she was sure it wasn't the kind he was used to. He didn't seem to mind. "I wanted to thank you again," he began, "for helping at the expo. But that's not the only reason I came." Emily raised an eyebrow. "All right. Then what is it?" He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands together. "You spoke about your farm, about how difficult things have been. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Most people talk numbers and profit margins, but you talked about legacy, about keeping something alive that matters. That struck me." Emily looked at him, unsure how to respond. "Well, it's just home," she said quietly. "That's all." "Sometimes home is the most important thing a person can build," he replied. "I've built companies, not homes. Maybe that's why your story stayed with me." She stared at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "I don't understand why that matters to someone like you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just trying to remember what real life feels like." Mary stood and excused herself, saying she had to check on something in the garden, though Emily suspected she just wanted to give them space. Alexander reached into his briefcase and took out a small folder. "I've been working on a project," he said. "Something that connects technology with real farmers. I'm looking for local partnerships, and I think your land could be part of it." Emily frowned. "Partnerships? You mean business?" "In a way," he said. "We'd test new sustainable equipment and share results. You'd keep ownership of your farm, and my company would invest in upgrades, solar-powered irrigation, soil sensors, Things that could make your work easier and your yield stronger. It sounded too good to be true. "And what's the catch?" she asked. He met her gaze. "You'd have to trust me," she folded her arms. "Trust doesn't come easy around here." "I wouldn't expect it to," he said calmly. "That's why I came in person." Emily looked at the papers but didn't touch them. "You're serious about this?" "Completely." She didn't answer right away. She didn't know whether to feel flattered or suspicious. This was a man who could buy half the county if he wanted. Why would he care about her little piece of land? After a long pause, she said, "I'll think about it." He nodded. "That's all I ask." Before he left, he turned to her again. "I'll be in town for a few days. If you'd like to talk more, here's my card." She took it, still half in disbelief, and watched as he got back into his car. The sound of the engine faded down the road, leaving only the rustle of the wind and Rusty barking at nothing in particular. When her mother came back inside, she found Emily still staring at the card. "You're thinking about saying yes, aren't you?" "I don't know," Emily said softly. "It feels risky. People like him don't just help strangers for no reason." "Maybe not," Mary said. "But sometimes people are brought into your life for a reason. Maybe this is yours." That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She walked out to the porch, sat on the old swing, and looked at the stars. The card was still in her pocket. She pulled it out and traced the name printed on it. Alexander Hale, CEO, Hale Industries. It looked sharp and cold, yet she remembered the warmth in his eyes when he talked about home. The next morning, she drove into town again. The same black car was parked outside the little diner near the square. She almost turned around, but something inside pushed her forward. When she walked in, he was sitting at a corner booth with a notebook and a cup of coffee. He looked up immediately and smiled. "Miss Dawson," he said. "I was hoping I'd see you again." "I've been thinking," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "If I agree to this partnership, what happens next?" He closed the notebook. "We start small. A few upgrades, some data collection, and a chance for you to show what your land can do. You'd be involved in every decision. No tricks, no hidden fine print." She studied him for a moment. "You really think this will work?" "I do," he said. "But only if we both believe in it." There was something steady in his tone that made her want to believe him. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was fate. Either way, she nodded. "All right, I'll do it." His smile widened just slightly. "You won't regret it." Over the next few days, things began to move quickly. His team visited the farm, setting up equipment and explaining how it worked. Emily felt both overwhelmed and amazed. For the first time in years, the place looked alive again, like it had a future. Her mother watched from the porch, her knitting forgotten in her lap. "I haven't seen you smile like this in a long time," she said softly. Emily laughed. "I guess it feels good to hope again." But not everyone in town was happy about it. People talked. Some said she was crazy to trust a man like that. Others whispered that she'd sold out. Emily tried not to listen, but the gossip stung. One afternoon, when Alexander returned to check on the progress, she found herself blurting out, "People think I'm a fool for trusting you." He looked at her calmly. "Do you?" She hesitated. "Not yet. But I might if this goes wrong." He smiled faintly. "Fair enough. Then I'll make sure it doesn't." They spent the next hour walking the fields together, discussing soil conditions and plans for the upcoming season. But beneath the surface, something unspoken grew. A quiet respect, a shared curiosity. Emily began to see that behind his wealth and confidence was a man who seemed a little lonely. Someone who wanted to belong somewhere real. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and gold, Alexander looked out over the land and said softly, "You were right, you know." "About what?" she asked. "Data doesn't grow corn." She laughed, the sound carrying across the fields. "Told you so." For a moment, they both stood there, quiet and comfortable. Neither of them knew exactly what this partnership would become, but both could feel that something had already started to change. Not just the farm, but their lives. And though Emily didn't say it out loud, deep down she sensed that this was only the beginning of something far bigger than she could yet understand. The morning sun spread a golden light over the farm, touching the wet grass and turning it into a sea of sparkles. Emily stood on the porch with a mug of coffee, watching the workers Alexander had sent moving around the fields. For the first time in years, the farm was full of energy and sound, machines humming, voices calling out, laughter mixing with the noise of the animals. It felt strange. Good, but strange. She still wasn't sure how everything had happened so fast. One day she was fighting to keep her family's land alive, and the next she had a team of professionals setting up solar panels, water systems, and technology that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Her mother came out and joined her. "It almost doesn't look like the same place," Mary said softly. "It doesn't feel like it either," Emily admitted. "But if it keeps the farm alive, I can live with a few changes." Mary smiled faintly. "You sound like your father." Emily looked toward the fields. "I just hope I'm doing the right thing." Later that morning, Alexander arrived. He always looked out of place on the dusty road. Clean suit, polished shoes, and that calm, thoughtful expression that never seemed to leave his face. He stepped out of his car and waved. "How's my favorite partner doing today?" he called. Emily shook her head with a smile. "Your favorite partner? You probably say that to everyone." "Not everyone," he said with a grin. They walked together through the rows of corn, still small but growing strong thanks to the new irrigation system. He explained how the sensors worked and what the data meant. But she half listened, more focused on the way his voice carried over the wind. After a while, they stopped near the fence, looking out over the wide green fields. "You've built something special here," he said quietly. "I can see why you fought so hard to keep it." "It's more than land," she replied. "It's all I've ever known. My dad used to say this place had a heartbeat." Alexander smiled. "Maybe it does. I think every place that means something does." They stood in silence for a moment before he turned to her. "Emily, I came here today for another reason." She looked at him curiously. "Oh, should I be worried?" "Not at all," he said. "I've been thinking about expanding this project, creating a program that helps small farmers all across the state. You'd be the first success story, but to make it work, I need someone who understands real farming to help present it to investors." Emily blinked. "You mean me?" "Yes," he said simply. "You," she laughed nervously. "You can't be serious. I don't know anything about business meetings or fancy investors." "That's exactly why I want you," he replied. "You're honest, real. People can see that in you. They'll believe what you say because it comes from experience, not a sales pitch." She bit her lip, unsure. "I don't even own a proper dress for that kind of thing." He smiled. "We can fix that." For the next few days, life on the farm became busier than ever. Between taking care of daily chores and preparing for the upcoming presentation, Emily barely had time to breathe. Alexander's assistant, a polite woman named Clara, helped her find something to wear for the event. Emily felt awkward being fitted for a dress, but when she looked in the mirror afterward, she hardly recognized herself. "You look perfect," Clara said with a smile. "I look like someone else," Emily murmured. The night before the presentation, she couldn't sleep. She sat by her window, watching the moon rise over the fields, thinking about how far she'd come. Part of her was proud. Another part was terrified. When the morning came, she met Alexander at his office in the city. It was a world completely different from hers. Glass walls, bright lights, people in suits moving quickly with coffee cups and phones in hand. She felt small, out of place, like a bird that had flown into the wrong sky. Alexander noticed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice didn't sound convincing. He smiled. "Just be yourself. That's all you need to do." The meeting room was large, filled with people who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Emily sat beside Alexander as he introduced the project. He spoke confidently about technology, sustainability, and growth. Then he turned to her. "Emily," he said, "would you tell them what this project has meant for your farm?" Her heart pounded. Everyone's eyes turned toward her. She took a deep breath. "I'm not a business person," she began, her voice soft but steady. "I'm just a farmer. My family has worked the same land for 3 generations. A few months ago, I thought we were going to lose everything. Then this project came along. It didn't just save our farm. It gave us hope again. It reminded me that change doesn't have to mean losing who you are." The room went silent. She could feel every gaze on her, but it didn't scare her anymore. "This isn't about money," she continued. "It's about keeping families on their land, about giving people a chance to dream again. If we can do that, even for a few farms like mine, then it's worth every bit of effort." When she finished, there was a pause, then a ripple of applause. Alexander looked at her with quiet pride. After the meeting, several investors came up to shake her hand, asking questions about her farm. She answered honestly, and they seemed to appreciate that. By the time they left, Alexander turned to her with a grin. "You were incredible," he said. "I thought I'd faint halfway through," she admitted. He laughed. "You didn't. You did better than most trained speakers." She smiled shyly. "So, did it work?" "It did," he said. "They're in." That night, Alexander hosted a small dinner to celebrate the success. The restaurant was elegant, full of soft music and candlelight. Emily felt a little out of place, but grateful all the same. As they ate, Alexander's tone grew more serious. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you," he said quietly. She looked up. "What is it?" He hesitated. "This partnership, the business side of it, it's more than just an investment for me. I've been thinking about something personal." She frowned slightly. "Personal?" He nodded slowly. "I know this might sound strange, but I've been alone for a long time. My life has been all about work. Meeting you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, how it feels to care about something real. That's why I want to make you a different kind of offer." Her heart skipped. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I want you to marry me." The words hung in the air like thunder. Emily stared at him, completely speechless. He went on carefully. "Before you think I've lost my mind, let me explain. This wouldn't just be about emotions. It would be a partnership in every sense. Together we could build something that changes lives. I'd make sure your family never struggles again. The farm would be secure. You'd have a say in everything I do related to agriculture." But he hesitated, meeting her eyes. "It would also be real. I want something genuine, not just business." Emily couldn't find her voice. "You barely know me," she finally said. "I know enough," he replied quietly. "I know you're honest, kind, and stronger than most people I've met. And I know that when you believe in something, you give it everything you have." She shook her head, trying to process it. "This is crazy. You're a billionaire. You're not just anything," he interrupted gently. "You're the most real person I've met in years." She stared down at her hands, her mind spinning. It was too much, too fast, too big. And yet a part of her heart was racing for reasons she couldn't explain. "I can't answer that right now," she said finally, her voice trembling. It's too sudden." "I understand," he said softly. "Take your time. There's no pressure. I'll wait for your answer." On the drive home that night, Emily couldn't think straight. The rain began to fall again, blurring the lights outside her window. She felt torn between two worlds. One where she stayed the simple farm girl she had always been, and another where everything could change forever. When she reached home, her mother was waiting on the porch, as if she somehow knew Emily needed her. "Something's happened," Mary said quietly. Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "He asked me to marry him." Mary didn't look shocked. She simply sighed. "I thought that might come someday." "You don't think it's crazy?" Emily asked. Her mother smiled sadly. "Maybe it is. But sometimes life doesn't wait for logic. It just gives you a choice, the kind that changes everything." Emily sat beside her, the sound of rain falling softly around them. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. Mary placed a hand over hers. "Listen to your heart, not your fear. It always knows the truth." Emily looked out into the dark fields where the new lights glowed faintly in the distance. Somewhere out there, the land her father had loved was still breathing, still alive. And maybe, just maybe, the man who had helped save it had changed something inside her too. As she sat there, lost in thought, one thing became clear. Her life would never be the same again. The days that followed were quiet but heavy. Emily tried to focus on the farm, but her thoughts kept circling back to that dinner, to Alexander's calm voice and those words she still couldn't quite believe. "I want you to marry me." Every time she replayed the moment, it felt unreal. People like him didn't propose to people like her. She was a farm girl with dirt under her nails, wearing the same worn boots every day. He was a billionaire who lived in glass towers and flew in private planes. It didn't make sense, yet his words had been too honest to ignore. At breakfast one morning, her mother noticed her silence. "You haven't said much these past few days," she said gently. "Still thinking about him?" Emily sighed. "I can't stop. Part of me feels crazy even considering it. But another part keeps wondering, what if? What if he really means it?" Mary smiled faintly. "Maybe he does. But don't let anyone rush your heart. You'll know what's right when it's time." That afternoon, Alexander called. His voice was calm, as always. I didn't want to pressure you, he said, but I'd like to see you again, even if it's just to talk. She hesitated before agreeing. All right. Come by the farm tomorrow. When he arrived the next day, she met him by the old oak tree near the edge of the field. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. He looked the same as always, composed. Confident, ma'am, but his eyes were softer this time. I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me, he said quietly. I wasn't sure either, she admitted. They walked in silence for a while, listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves. Finally, Emily stopped and turned to face him. Why me, Alexander? She asked. You could be with anyone, someone who understands your world. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because I've had that world, he said simply. I've had the people, the wealth, the parties, and none of it ever felt real. Then I met you and everything changed. You don't see me for what I own. You see me for who I am. That's something I've never had. She looked down at her hands. And what if I say no? Then I'll respect that, he said softly. I'll still help your farm. I'll still believe in you. But I'd be lying if I said it wouldn't hurt. His honesty caught her off guard. There was no arrogance, no pressure, just quiet sincerity. I need time, she said finally. He nodded. Take all the time you need. Over the next few weeks, she tried to carry on with life as usual. The farm was thriving now. Crops growing faster than ever, equipment running smoothly, and the small team of workers smiling more often than not. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel so far away. But even with the progress, her heart felt unsettled. Whenever she looked at the land, she saw traces of Alexander everywhere. The solar panels gleaming in the sun, the new irrigation lines winding through the soil, the small sign at the gate that read, Green Future Pilot Farm. One evening, as she walked back to the house, she found him waiting by the fence. She hadn't expected him, but she wasn't surprised either. Long day? He asked. Always, she said with a small smile. What brings you here? He hesitated, then said, There's a conference in New York next week. Investors, journalists, all kinds of people. They want me to bring you along, to show the face behind this success. Me? In New York? She laughed. That's a bit out of my comfort zone. I'll be there the whole time, he said. You won't have to face anyone alone. She looked at him carefully. You really think I can handle that? I know you can, he said. You've handled everything life's thrown at you so far. And so, a week later, she found herself stepping into a world she had only seen on television. The city was alive with movement, bright lights, car horns, and people who looked like they were always in a hurry. Alexander stayed close by, guiding her through the noise. He took her to a tall glass building where the event was being held. The moment she walked inside, she felt out of place again, surrounded by designer suits, glittering jewelry, and conversations she couldn't quite follow. Alexander leaned down and whispered, You're doing fine. Just be yourself. When he introduced her to a group of investors, she smiled politely and tried not to fidget. They asked her about the farm, and she answered honestly, talking about the land, the challenges, and how much the project had helped. One of the older men smiled. It's refreshing to hear someone speak from the heart, he said. We could use more of that in this business. The evening passed quickly. There were speeches, handshakes, and flashes from cameras. But what stood out most to Emily was the way Alexander looked at her. Not like she was someone he was showing off, but like he was genuinely proud of her. Later, when the event ended, they stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city lights. The air was cool, carrying the distant sound of traffic. You did amazing, he said. I just told the truth, she replied. That's why it worked, he said with a smile. For a long moment, they stood there in comfortable silence, watching the skyline. Then Alexander turned toward her, his voice soft. I know I've asked a lot of you, he said. Maybe too much, but I meant every word I said before. My offer still stands, and not because of what you can do for me, but because of who you are. Emily looked out at the city lights, thinking about her small farm back home, her mother, and the life she had built from nothing. If I said yes, she asked quietly, what would that look like? It would mean partnership, he said. Not just in business, but in life. We'd work together, travel together, build something lasting. But I'd never ask you to give up who you are. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. And the farm? It would always be yours, he said without hesitation. I'd never take that from you. Her heart beat faster. She had imagined what this might feel like, standing here, caught between two worlds. But living it was something else entirely. Before she could speak, the door behind them opened and a woman stepped out calling Alexander's name. She was elegant, confident, and familiar with him in a way that made Emily's chest tighten. Alexander, the woman said smoothly. The board members want a quick photo with you. He nodded. Of course. Then he turned to Emily. I'll be right back. As he walked away, the woman gave Emily a polite but distant smile before following him inside. Emily stood alone for a moment, staring at the city below. She suddenly felt small again, a visitor in a world that would never really be hers. Later that night in the hotel room Alexander had arranged for her, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about that woman, about how easily she fit into his world. Maybe that was the truth she had been avoiding. Maybe love wasn't enough to bridge the gap between two different lives. The next morning, she packed her bag early. When Alexander came to check on her, he looked surprised. You're leaving already? He asked. I need to get back, she said quietly. There's work to do at the farm. He hesitated, sensing something in her tone. Did something happen? She shook her head. No, I just realized I'm not sure I belong here. He stepped closer. Emily, she stopped him gently. You've done more for me than I could ever repay, but I need to figure out what I want before I make any promises. He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, then nodded slowly. I understand. The drive back to Kentucky felt longer than ever. When she reached home, her mother was waiting on the porch again. You came back early, Mary said softly. Emily sat beside her, her eyes tired. I don't think I'm cut out for his world. Mary looked at her gently. Maybe you're not, but maybe he's willing to come into yours. Days turned into weeks. The farm kept thriving, but something felt missing. She told herself it was just exhaustion, but deep down she knew the truth. She missed him. His voice, his calm presence, the way he believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. Then, one quiet evening, as she was feeding the horses, she heard the sound of tires on gravel. She turned and there he was, standing by his car, dressed not in a suit this time, but in jeans and boots that were already dusty from the road. You're back, she said softly. He smiled. I told you I'd wait for your answer. But I realized something while I was waiting. I don't want to change who you are. I just want to be part of your world. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. You'd really trade your city for this? He looked around at the fields, the sky glowing orange with sunset. It's not a trade, he said quietly. It's a return to something real. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. Maybe I was scared of the wrong thing. Maybe what scared me wasn't losing the farm. It was losing myself. He reached out and took her hand. You'll never lose yourself with me. I promise. As the sun dipped below the hills, the two of them stood together. A man who had everything and a woman who had fought for every inch of her world. And somehow in that quiet Kentucky evening, they both realized that maybe they didn't belong to separate worlds after all. Maybe they were just two hearts finding their way to the same place. The days after Alexander returned to Kentucky felt different. There was a calmness in the air, a quiet sort of peace that had been missing for a long time. Emily didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. Her heart finally felt steady. Every morning she woke before sunrise, just like always. The routine of the farm hadn't changed, feeding the horses, checking the fences, walking through the fields still damp with morning dew. But there was something new now. Sometimes when she turned around, she'd see Alexander standing a few yards away, watching her with a soft smile, holding a mug of coffee. He didn't talk much those mornings, and neither did she. But it didn't feel like silence. It felt like understanding. One morning, as the first light touched the hills, he said quietly, I can see why you love this place. Everything here feels honest, Emily smiled. It's not fancy, but it's real. Every bit of it, he nodded. That's exactly what I need more of. Over the next few weeks, Alexander started helping out around the farm. At first, it was almost funny watching him try to work the old tractor or carry bales of hay that weighed more than he expected. But he didn't complain. He listened, learned, and laughed at himself when things didn't go right. The workers liked him too. They had been wary at first. This rich man, showing up in expensive boots, but soon they saw that he was genuine. He treated everyone kindly, asked questions, and didn't act like he was above anyone. One afternoon, while they were fixing the old barn roof together, Emily glanced down and saw a few of the workers whispering and smiling. When she asked what they were talking about, one of them grinned and said, "We're just wondering when the two of you are going to stop pretending this is just business." Emily laughed and shook her head. "You all need to mind your own work." But her cheeks warmed anyway. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Alexander sat beside her on the porch steps. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the air smelled faintly of grass and smoke from a distant chimney. "Do you ever miss the city?" she asked quietly. "Sometimes," he said, "but not for the reasons you think. I miss the noise when I need to hide my thoughts. Out here it's too quiet. It makes you listen to yourself." She looked at him. "And what are you hearing?" He took a deep breath, then smiled faintly. "That I don't want to go back without you." Emily felt her heart skip. She didn't answer right away. Words weren't enough for moments like that. The next few days were full of quiet joy. They spent their mornings working, their afternoons planning small improvements for the farm, and their evenings talking on the porch until the stars came out. It felt like something steady, something worth keeping. But good things have a way of being tested. One morning, a black car pulled up to the farm. A man in a sharp suit stepped out and greeted Alexander with a polite nod. "Sir, we need to talk," the man said. "The board is getting restless. The investors are threatening to withdraw. The media's been asking questions about your arrangement here." Emily stood nearby, pretending not to listen, but her chest tightened. Alexander's face stayed calm, but his voice was firm. "Tell them I'll handle it." "Handle it soon," the man said. "They're saying you've abandoned your company." When the car drove away, Emily walked over. "What's going on?" he sighed. "The board isn't happy that I've been spending so much time here. They think I'm distracted." She crossed her arms. "Maybe you should go back and fix it." He looked at her, surprised. "You want me to leave?" "I don't want you to," she said softly. "But I don't want you to lose everything you worked for either. This farm doesn't need saving anymore. You've done enough." He shook his head. "It's not just about the farm anymore." But later that night, she found him sitting on the porch alone, staring at the dark fields. She sat beside him without a word. After a while, he said quietly, "When I came here, I thought I was helping you, but I think you've been the one helping me. You reminded me what real life feels like. I don't want to lose that again." She looked at him. "You won't, no matter where you are." The next morning, he packed a small bag. "I have to go to New York," he said, "but I'll be back soon, I promise." Emily nodded, trying to smile. "Go do what you have to do." As his car disappeared down the road, the silence that followed felt heavier than she expected. Days passed slowly. The work on the farm kept her busy, but her thoughts wandered often. Every sound of a car made her glance toward the gate, hoping. Then, one evening, the news came on while her mother was making dinner. The anchor's voice said, "Alexander Hale, CEO of Hale Industries, has officially announced his decision to resign and sell his majority shares, stating he intends to pursue new ventures in sustainable farming." Emily froze, her heart thudding. Her mother turned to her with wide eyes. "Did he tell you about this?" Emily shook her head slowly. "No, he didn't." She didn't know what to feel: shock, worry, pride, or fear. He had given up everything. For what? For her? For this small patch of land in Kentucky? 3 days later, she got her answer. It was late afternoon when she heard footsteps behind her in the barn. When she turned, he was standing there. No suit, no driver, no bodyguards. Just him. "You didn't tell me," she said, her voice trembling. "I wanted to tell you in person," he said softly. "I sold my shares. The company will keep running, but it's not mine anymore. Why would you do that? She whispered. That was your whole life. He stepped closer. It was. But I realized something. I built a company out of numbers and metal, but I never built a life. Not until I met you. Tears welled in her eyes. You didn't have to give up everything for me. I didn't give it up for you, he said. I gave it up for us, for a future that feels real. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, a simple silver ring glimmered in the soft light. This time there's no contract, he said quietly. No deal, no conditions, just love. Will you marry me, Emily? Her breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. Yes, I will. He slipped the ring on her finger, and she laughed through her tears. You're going to get dirt all over that suit if you keep standing here. He smiled. Then I'll finally fit in. Their wedding wasn't a grand event. It was small, simple, and full of warmth. They held it right there on the farm, under the oak tree where they'd first talked about their future. The guests were neighbors, farmhands, and a few close friends. There were no flashing cameras, no reporters, no gold decorations, just laughter, music, and the smell of fresh flowers. When they exchanged vows, Emily's hands trembled. You found me when I was losing everything, she said softly. And somehow you gave me more than I ever dreamed of. Alexander smiled, his voice steady. You showed me that love isn't something you buy or plan. It's something you grow. One honest moment at a time. After the ceremony, they danced under the stars while fireflies flickered around them. The music was soft, the night air warm. For the first time in years, Emily felt completely at peace. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The farm expanded, partnering with local schools and small growers. Together, they started a project that helped farmers learn sustainable techniques. The work was hard, but every day felt meaningful. Sometimes people from the city came to visit, journalists, investors, curious travelers. They asked questions about Alexander's decision to leave his empire behind. He always gave the same quiet answer, because sometimes the best investment you can make is in people. And Emily would smile beside him, knowing exactly what he meant. Years later, on a summer morning, Emily stood by the same oak tree, watching the fields shimmer in the sunlight. The land was green and strong again, full of life. Behind her, Alexander was talking with a group of young farmers about soil care. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands dirty, and he looked happier than he ever had in his life. When he caught her looking, he smiled. What? She shrugged. Just thinking how far we've come. He walked over and took her hand. And we're just getting started. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of laughter from the workers in the distance. The world around them had changed, but somehow the simple things still mattered most. Love, work, honesty. Emily leaned her head against his shoulder. You know, she said softly, if someone told me a few years ago that a Kentucky farm girl would marry a billionaire, I'd have laughed. He smiled. And now? Now, she said, smiling up at him, I know anything's possible, as long as it's real. And as the sun dipped below the hills, painting the sky in gold and rose, the two of them stood together. Proof that sometimes, the most unexpected love stories are the ones that were meant to be all along.